Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rosenstein, and Ms. Brand. Thank you very much for coming by my office. I appreciate it. For the record, my friend from Texas raises a question about delay in filling these positions. Deputy Attorney General Jim Cole was held up by the Republicans in this committee 400 days before he was confirmed. Stuart Dellery, nominee to be Associate Attorney General under President Obama, was held up for almost a year. He never received a floor vote and ultimately withdrew his nomination. I trust you will be treated more professionally by this committee. Let me ask specific questions, if I can, about this issue of the Russian involvement. And Mr. Rosenstein, I respect the fact that you haven't read this report, but it's 15 pages long and it's on the internet, and it's not classified. And I want to read several paragraphs and really put in perspective why we're asking you these questions today. Because what we have learned from this intelligence report 2 months ago is historic. It is a cyber attack on the United States of America like none we've ever seen before. I quote from our intelligence agencies: Russian efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election represent the most recent expression of Moscow's long-standing desire to undermine the U.S.-led liberal democratic order. But these activities demonstrated a significant escalation in directness, level of activity, scope of effort compared to previous operations. The intelligence agencies say, we assess Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the U.S. presidential election. Russian goals were to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton, harm her electability and potential presidency. We further assess Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for President-elect Trump. This was not put out by the Democratic National Committee. This was published by our intelligence agencies. And it's the reason that many of us believe this is not like an ordinary investigation by the Department of Justice. This is historic. It's always critical when it comes to filling these appointments. But this is an historic constitutional moment in our history. So I'd like to ask you, Mr. Rosenstein, will you commit that if you're confirmed, you will not impede or shut down any FBI or Justice Department investigation into Russian efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election?
Senator, on the issue of foreign interference in American elections, I can assure you that you and I are on the same side. I will certainly support any properly predicated investigation related to interference by the Russians or by anybody else in American elections.
I might say for the record that Attorney General Sessions was asked that same question at his confirmation hearing, and he would not make that same commitment. Second question, will you commit to promptly inform the American people if the Department of Justice closes, terminates, or declines to further pursue an investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election?
I'm sorry, Senator, what exactly is the...
Inform the American people if the Department of Justice closes, terminates, or declines to further pursue an investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
Senator, I've been a prosecutor, as you know, for 27 years, and our primary responsibility as prosecutors is to collect the evidence and determine whether or not we can prove a case in court. Often there are other concerns that arise in investigations, and in this particular one, Senator, I think I would need to consult with the director of the FBI and with the intelligence community before I make any commitment about what would be the outcome of such an investigation.
I'm asking you if the outcome is closing or terminating or declining to further pursue the investigation, would you report that to the American people?
Senator, I don't want to make any commitment about what I would do at the conclusion of an investigation without knowing the details of the investigation, talking with the director of the FBI. I can assure you that if it's appropriate to release it to the American public, I would.
Do you pledge to continue to pursue any ongoing investigation by the Justice Department into Russian interference in the 2016 election or any other attempts Russia may have made to undermine the United States, our political system, or our position in the world?
If there is an ongoing investigation in the Justice Department into interference with our elections by Russia or anybody else, and it's properly predicated and there's a basis for a federal investigation, then absolutely I would support it.
This is another question that Senator Sessions refused to answer in his earlier hearing. I'd like to ask you about the scope of the Sessions recusal. I'm not sure where we stand today based on the letter which this committee received from the Attorney General. Have you had an opportunity to read the wording in his recusal and the letter that he sent this committee?
I'm familiar with it, Senator, from media accounts. I was pretty busy with your colleagues yesterday. I know I didn't read the letter yesterday, but I'm generally familiar with it.
What he said in his recusal Thursday, quote, "I have now decided to recuse myself from any existing or future investigations of any matter relating in any way to the campaigns of the President of the United States." This, I might say, is a partial recusal when it comes to the investigations into Russian influence on President Trump and his circle of advisors and associates. This recusal does not extend to post-election Russian contacts with the Trump transition team and the Trump administration, like the Russian ambassador's meetings with Jared Kushner and Michael Flynn, on its face. But yet the letter which the committee was sent says in its final paragraph, and I read, "The March 3rd, 2017 letter, which many of us sent to Attorney General Sessions, also asked why I had not recused myself from, quote, Russian contacts with the Trump transition team and administration. The Attorney General says, I understand the scope of the recusal as described in the department's press release would include any such matters. So do you believe that this recusal now would affect any Russian contacts with the Trump transition team or administration?"
Senator, I'm familiar with the department's recusal policies and regulations, and they're actually more complicated than you might think because we're governed by the general government-wide conflict of interest provisions in Title V. We're governed by the Code of Federal Regulations, Title V government-wide. We're also governed by a particular statute in Title 28 and by regulations that apply to the Department of Justice under Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations. In addition to that, as lawyers, we're governed by bar rules. So there are a lot of policies that apply, and that's why it's important for us when these issues do arise to consult with career professionals. And I think it's important also, Senator, to understand that what we tell our people is that when you recuse, there's no presumption you've done anything wrong. You recuse because the issue justifies your recusal. So I don't know the details. If I were confirmed, I would certainly make sure that if the Attorney General were recused, that I wouldn't discuss the matter with him, and I have not discussed the matter with him.
Thank you, but that's not my question. What I'm asking you to do, and I want to give you the time to do it properly because this is an important matter, and I know you're an excellent attorney and want to get this done right. I want to give you the official recusal by Attorney General Sessions of last week and his letter which he sent to this committee, and ask you for clarity as to the scope of this recusal. I think that the Attorney General left a wide gap in there about contacts between the Russians and the transition team and any members of this administration. And I want to know how you read it in light of these two, and I want to give you the time to do it properly and professionally.
Senator, I appreciate it, but I just don't know how I would have a basis for evaluating that without access to the information. I presume that the Attorney General consulted with career professionals in the department who knew the facts. And if I become the Deputy Attorney General, and I believe that that's not a sufficient recusal, I'll certainly consult with them. But if I were to read it today, Senator, I would only know what you knew. I wouldn't know what was the nature of the investigation. I wouldn't know what's under investigation that you may or may not need to recuse from. So I just wouldn't be in position to comment on whether it's adequate. But I do know that I know the people in the department who make these decisions. These are nonpartisan career folks, and I believe they would have made a good faith effort to appropriately.
Mr. Rosenstein, I'm not questioning the process. I'm just asking for clarity as to the recusal of the Attorney General in his own words, not for the entire process that led up to his conclusion. I'm asking you how you read his own words. Mr. Chairman, I yield.